There have been many famous gangsters throughout history. Men like John Dillinger, Al Capone, and Pablo Escobar come to most people's mind when they think of notorious criminals. Crime is a dangerous game that can turn violent in an instant, but one of the most deadly gangsters of all time was a mother. Before Pablo Escobar ran the cocaine trafficking scene in the 80s, there was Griselda Blanco. She was a prominent figure in the drug smuggling industry throughout the 70s and 80s. Griselda Blanco was born on February 15, 1943 in Colombia. Her childhood wasn't like most young girls. She wasn't playing with dolls or having slumber parties. Griselda had a much different childhood. Her mother was a sex worker who exposed the young girl to a criminal lifestyle. She had already committed her first crime before she hit puberty. At the young age of 11, Griselda helped with a kidnapping for ransom scheme. She lured a young 10-year-old boy from a wealthy family to be kidnapped. Things didn't go as planned, and the family didn't pay the ransom. As a result, she shot the young boy. This gave Griselda her first taste of life as a hardened criminal. Growing up, Griselda and her mother had next to nothing. Money was tight and they were barely getting by. While Griselda was determined to get the things she wanted, she was never educated on how to earn a living honestly. By the age of 13, she was a skilled pickpocketer. The little girl could spot an easy target and get what she wanted without anyone suspecting a thing. Life didn't get any easier for Griselda in her teenage years. Her mother had moved her boyfriend into their house. He wasn't a loving and supportive partner to the mother. Instead, he was a highly inappropriate man who used this new living opportunity as a way to start sexually abusing the teenager. At the age of 19, Griselda ran away from home. It hasn't been confirmed how she was able to financially support herself after running away. Some people believe she was pickpocketing and looting to get what she needed. Others claim that she became a sex worker to earn money. Only Griselda knows what really happened during this period of time. But one thing is for sure, this period of time is what hardened her for what was to come next. Throughout Griselda's run, she had many nicknames, like Cocaine Godmother and La Mandrina. But one of her most memorable nicknames was Black Widow. Anyone who wronged Griselda would pay a fatal price, including her husband's. Carlos Trujillo was an immigrant smuggler who Griselda met when she was 13. Over the years, she had participated in several crimes with this man. When she was 20, the two became married and ended up having 3 sons together. Their marriage didn't last long, and they divorced in 1969. While they remained in contact on a professional level, a business deal went wrong in the early 1970s. Carlos Trujillo did her wrong, and she wasn't going to let him get away with it. The thing about Griselda Blanco was, it didn't matter what a person's relationship was to her. If they did her dirty, she would have them killed. Being her children's father didn't make Carlos any different from her other victims to come. She had him killed without even thinking twice about it. It wasn't long until Griselda met her second husband. She remarried to Alberto Bravo in 1972. When she married Carlos Trujillo in 1964, they immigrated from Colombia to Queens, New York with fake passports. They had some run-ins with the law, causing them to flee back to Colombia. Later, they returned to the US to live in Miami. In Miami, Griselda was running a cocaine business, but business was about to take off in a way Griselda could only dream about. Alberto Bravo was a drug trafficker. He introduced Griselda to a whole different side of the trade. At first, she began trafficking marijuana, but this wasn't the easiest drug to smuggle. It is bulky with a strong odor. Also, there wasn't a high demand for it at the time. But cocaine, on the other hand, was much more profitable and in demand. It was also easier to get across the border. Griselda also devised a plan for smuggling that people were none the wiser about. She designed special bras and underwear with hidden pockets. She hired several female couriers who would smuggle the drugs wearing the undergarments. During her marriage to Alberto Bravo, they moved back to Queens. Business was expanding like crazy because they had a direct line from Colombia to New York. It was even rumored that this operation was taking business away from the Italian Mafia. Since business was exploding, the couple needed to manage both ends of the line. Griselda stayed in Queens to take care of things on the American side, while Alberto went to Colombia to manage that end. By 1975, things weren't going as smoothly. Blanco noticed there were millions of dollars missing. On top of that, Operation Banshee, a joint sting of the NYPD and DEA, was after the duo. They were very close to busting Griselda and Alberto. Griselda Blanco had business to take care of, and she wasn't going to let some sting operation get in her way. She managed to escape and flee to Colombia. Now, only a few people know for sure what happened when she arrived in Colombia. What we do know is that Alberto Bravo had screwed his wife and others in the drug trade out of millions of dollars. His days had come to an end when he was brutally shot in the face. but who was holding the gun will always be a mystery. Many people believe it was his wife Griselda. There's a story that claims she took a pistol out of her boot and shot him, while he shot her in the stomach with a round from his Uzi. Other people believe it was Pablo Escobar who pulled the trigger. Despite how messy things became, Griselda wasn't about to give up the business. Now that Alberto Bravo was dead, she was in full control. The direct line of smuggling cocaine from Colombia to New York was still open, but Griselda was staying put in Colombia. Griselda was a very innovative thinker. She wanted to make sure she was always a step ahead of the trade. It was believed that her next move was smuggling the drugs to the US using a ship named Gloria. This allowed her to send more drugs with each trip and increase profits. Around this time is when people started referring to her as the godmother. By 1978, Griselda married husband number 3. This time around, she married a bank robber named Dario Sepulveda. She got pregnant with her 4th son and named him Michael Corleone. This was a tribute to the Godfather Al Pacino. It also showed how much pride she took in holding the godmother title. During her run, Griselda was known for her violent streak. If anyone did her wrong, they would pay the price fatally. She was a shoot first, ask questions later type of lady. While the drug business was lucrative in Colombia, Griselda was longing to go back to Miami. Although her business was small when she was originally there, she felt things could be different this time around. Going back to Miami did present some challenges for Griselda, but it wasn't anything she couldn't handle. She used her savvy business skills to get her business growing again. And for a while, it worked. Griselda Blanco was able to establish herself as the cocaine queen in Miami and lived a very luxurious lifestyle. At this point, Griselda was wealthier than ever. She owned a lavish home, had luxury cars, and a private jet. She would also host glamorous parties with some of the biggest players in the drug trade. But things weren't picture perfect behind closed doors. Blanco had begun smoking a type of refined cocaine in excess. This would cause her to become increasingly paranoid and was the root of her violent outbursts. There was also some dangerous competition in the area. The Medellin Cartel was steadily bringing drugs to the same area. It wouldn't be long until there was a full-blown drug war in Miami. Now, there are a lot of rumors when it comes to the relationship between Griselda Blanco and Pablo Escobar. By the time Pablo Escobar and the Medellin Cartel were beginning operations, Griselda was already well established. Some people say that Escobar admired Griselda and looked at her as a role model. Others believe that they were each other's top competition and enemy. But what is known is that between 1979 and 1984, South Florida turned into a war zone. It wasn't just the Medellin Cartel Griselda has to worry about. There were several rivals that were desperate for her position. Griselda was running a very dangerous business. She had several men who worked for her, including hitmen. In 1979, the first shots were fired, starting a full-blown drug war. Some of Griselda's men killed a rival drug dealer at the liquor store outside the Dadeland shopping mall. They went inside the mall shooting recklessly. Nobody was killed in the mall, but some workers were injured from the shots. This was just one of several assassinations that Griselda's men pulled off. The men had a van that they would use for hits. Eventually, the police got the vehicle in their custody. But this wouldn't stop Griselda from sending out her hitmen. She just had to be more creative. That's when she devised a plan for carrying out hits using motorcycles. By the early 1980s, Miami was the #1 spot in the US for cocaine. Over 70% of the country's drug trade was happening in southern Florida, and Griselda was responsible for the majority of it. She was running a billion-dollar business and overseeing thousands of pounds of cocaine on a monthly basis. But as the drug business grew, more people got killed. In 1980, over 200 people in Miami were killed. Most of these killings were linked to drug crimes. By 1981, Miami was known as the murder capital of the world. It wasn't the tourists or the average city residents that were being murdered. The majority of these killings were people originally from Colombia and Cuba who had been involved in the drug trade. The godmother was responsible for a lot of these killings. Many people believe that Miami wouldn't have been such a dangerous place during those years if it weren't for her. She was the type of criminal that wanted to strike fear. Other drug lords only killed if they had a purpose. They would make no mistakes in their hits. But Griselda wasn't like that. She wouldn't take any chances on anyone who could take her down. There were even times when she had the wrong people killed and shrugged it off like it was nothing. However, Griselda did have one hitman who was able to reason with her slightly. You see, when Griselda ordered a hit on someone, it didn't mean to just kill that one person. Anyone who was in the same vicinity as that person was meant to be killed as well, even if that meant women and children. Jorge Ayala was her most trusted hitman. but he refused to kill children and began to stop other hitmen from carrying out those hits as well. In 1983, Griselda's husband, Dario Sepulveda, made a plan to escape to Colombia with their son. His attempt to flee landed him in some hot water. Griselda arranged for her hitmen to show up dressed as policemen. They carried out a brutal hit and returned her youngest son back to Florida. This hit wasn't like any of Griselda's previous hits, though. Her husband's brother Paco was a criminal with many relationships in the drug trade. Not only did he initiate a war with Griselda over this killing, but many of her men turned their backs on her to join Paco's side. Even her top supplier joined forces with Paco. By 1984, the Cocaine Queen's castle was beginning to crumble. Her old supplier, Marta Saldarriaga Ochoa, was after her over a $1.8 million debt. She placed a hit on Marta to get out of paying, which was successfully carried out, but she still had to watch her back. Paco wasn't the only person looking for Griselda Blanco. Her second husband wasn't forgotten. Alberto Bravo's nephew Jaime was patrolling the mall and other spots where Griselda was known to shop, waiting for the chance to kill her. The DEA was also on the hunt for Blanco. She knew that if she wanted to lay low, she would have to get out of Miami. With so many enemies following her trail, she escaped to California to lay low. At this point in time, both the DEA and Jaime Bravo were determined to find her. But the DEA knew Jaime would place a hit if he got to her first. They ended up arresting him to get him out of the way. Once Jaime Bravo was out of the way, the DEA was able to make their move and arrest Griselda Blanco. She was arrested in 1985 at the age of 42. She ended up being sentenced to 20 years in jail for drug trafficking. But the DEA was still continuing their investigation on the murders she was responsible for. When the investigation into the murders started, Jorge Ayala became the star witness. Griselda couldn't believe that one of her most trusted men was now going to rat her out. If he testified everything he witnessed, she would be met with the death penalty. But that's not how things turned out. Ayala was discredited from his position as a witness due to a major sex scandal with secretaries from the Miami-Dade District Office. Behind bars, Griselda gave one more shot at her operations. A local crack dealer named Charles Cosby was infatuated with her. He ended up writing to her and eventually got to meet her. The two ended up getting married behind bars, and she thought she could use this man to do her dirty work. She developed a plan for her new husband and his men to kidnap John F. Kennedy. The kidnappers would hold him hostage in exchange for her freedom. If they carried out the act, the kidnappers would get paid $5 million each. But their plan completely fumbled. They spotted Kennedy out walking his dogs, but there were NYPD cars nearby, which scared them off. At Griselda's trial, she ended up taking a plea deal. She stayed in prison until 2004 when she was released and sent back to Colombia. Although she was free from prison, Griselda Blanco wasn't exactly free. She had made too many enemies over the years. Many of these enemies wanted to see her dead. In an ironic turn of events, Griselda was killed in 2012 outside of a butcher shop in Medellin. The assassin was riding a motorcycle the same way she taught her hitmen to kill. So, who was Griselda Blanco's killer? That's still a mystery to this day. Thousands of people were angry at her for killing a loved one. She also made a lot of enemies through rival drug lords. But her assassin did take a note out of her playbook. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Get ready for our next video where we unravel the gripping story of Toto Reina, the notorious Mafia boss. Subscribe so you won't miss it. Thank you.